What's your name, sir?
Chad Shafulski. Can you spell that?
Yes.
SHEFULSKY. Okay. So I'm gonna read it real quick. And John 1:13 says, "Which were born not of blood, nor of the will of the flesh, nor of the will of man, but of God." And this is my life verse, and I read this shortly after being saved. I was saved a year ago in a Friday chapel at my school. Brother Williams was talking about hell and the tragedy of it, how there's no hope in hell.
Right.
You can be there 10,000 years, and you can be there 20,000 years, and there's absolutely no hope. There's no hope of getting out. If God had put a time limit on how long you'd be in hell, that would give you hope. But he says there's no hope. So first thing I'm going to get to is I'm going to describe this verse to you. The first 6 words of John 1:13 tell us that we're not here of blood. And I think that means that your flesh, you're the devil, you're not here because of him. The next 7 words tell us here that we're not here because of the flesh. Again, that we're not here because the devil wants us here. The next 9 words tell us here we're here of God. And if God put us here and it says, but the will, not of the will of man, but of God, the will of God. And that's the title of my sermon, God's will. So you think that if God specifically wanted you here, not the world, not the flesh, not the devil, that serving him would be something that would be ideal, right? So my first point is man did not put us here, God did. In Genesis 1:26 through 31, it tells us of the creation of man. Adam being the first man, Eve being the first woman. That's how we got here. The Big Bang Theory, stupid. I don't get it.
Amen. That's right.
My second
Come on.
point, your heart is wicked, and it will destroy you if you let it. In Joshua 7:20 verse through 26, it tells us of Achan's sin. And they were going into the promised land. God was giving them the promised land. They were fulfilling God's will, and they were conquering Canaan land. But when they destroyed Jericho, Achan saw, and he listened to his heart when he saw the Babylonian garments and the gold and the silver. And I think it's 30 pieces of silver and a wedge of gold. His heart told him that, oh, you should grab those. But he probably had an argument there. God told us not to grab these. This is his. This is like a tithe, a 10% to God. But then there's his heart again. And what does the Bible say about your heart? That it's desperately wicked above all else, right? So what? He listened to his heart. He took the wedge of gold. And what did that get him? His entire family died. He died. He was stoned, burned. And the Bible says there's a pile of rocks there today. Wouldn't that be a sad thing for you? Most of you, all of you actually go to church. Most of you might go to a Christian school or your homeschool. You've been around church. And all that's to remember you is a pile of rocks in the middle of nowhere that no one knows where it's at. So my next point, or actually there's another one here. Ananias and Sapphira in Acts 5:1 through 16. They got some money, they sold some land, and they told God that they were going to give it all to him. But they kept some of it back. What happened to them? They both died. So the consequences on listening to your heart are pretty severe. You see, with Eve in the garden, the serpent beguiled her. It tells us in 2 Corinthians 11:3 that what was their punishment? They were kicked out of the garden. They didn't again have that straight up walk with Jesus that they used to have. They used to be able to talk to him face to face. But now they couldn't because they listened to what? Their heart. My next point is a better one. Is staying in God's will. In Genesis 37, 39, 40, 41, all the way down to 50, it tells us about Joseph. And we all know Joseph. He was sold into slavery by his brothers. He was in Egypt. He was lied about in Potiphar's house. He was put in prison a couple times, actually. He was forgotten about in prison. But eventually, where did he end up? Second in command, an Israelite, second in command in the land of Egypt. That's because he stayed in God's will. God's will has benefits.
Sure.
Pastor Wilkerson stayed in God's
good.
will.
Yes,
sir.
And as one of the guys said here, there are trials with God's will. Joseph went through some pretty hard trials. I mean, imagine being a high-ranking employee in your business, and then your boss's wife lies about you, and you get thrown in jail. Then you get forgotten about in jail, and you're like, I know all of you would be like, God, what's going on? I thought I was doing what you said. I'm not being blessed right now. I'm in a prison. But he stayed faithful to God's will, and eventually he got out, and he became the second in command. So, and another great example of staying in God's will is Jesus Christ himself. When he went to the cross for us. God's will for his life was to die and pay for our sin.
Yes, sir.
You realize if he hadn't done God's will, none of us would be here today. We'd be lost. We'd be going to hell. We wouldn't be going to heaven. Our eternal life would be gone.
Yeah.
But he followed God's will. And like I did a year ago, because he followed God's will, we get heaven. We get to go for eternity. Our minds can't even comprehend eternity. Forever. We don't have to go to hell. God went to hell for us, or Jesus. He died for us because he followed God's will. So if we stay in Jesus' will, there will be benefits. In Matthew 27:31-56 tells us about the crucifixion. Luke 24:1-12 tells us of the victory over death. That is the fulfillment of God's will. Number 6, God's will is not the same for everyone. Pastor Wilkerson's God's will for him is not going to be the same as for Joe. It's not going to be. Joe's not going to do everything that Pastor Wilkerson had to go through. It's going to be different. It's going to be, God's will is special, unique to every one of us. So, okay. So, again, with God's will. So, I'm going to share a little bit of my testimony with you. And I was born in 2001, July, same day as Miss Wilkerson. And when I was 2 years old, my mom left our house. I had an older brother, and my younger brother was literally 2 days old. And she left. And that was hard for me. That was a trial. And how many of you say that was a really big trial in someone's life, for someone's mother to leave? It's a big trial. And I went from being 2 years old to about 6, being just me, my dad, and my little brother. I lost, I'm not allowed to see my older brother anymore. I had 2 younger siblings I'm not allowed to see anymore. And that hurt me for a little. That was the main reason I did not get saved. Because I didn't want God's will for my life if he was going to let that happen to me. But a couple years down the road, I was 6 years old, July 16th. My mom now, they met, literally went on like one date, and then they got married. And to me, she was what I needed. She is a godly lady. Her father is a pastor, and a good pastor, and they began to help me deal with bitterness. So, and eventually I got to the point where I was ready to accept what God had for me, his will for my life. And God's blessings, those who follow God's blessings, he will bless you. Those who follow God's will, you will be blessed. And there is countless places in the Bible. We're saying, so if God made you, so here's another verse we can use. You're fearfully and wonderfully made. So that's my follow God's will for your life, and he will bless you.
Good job, Chad.